very attractive MG GT. It was a factory V8.
Oh, a lovely car. Now, that's the proper Leyland-built one, not a later conversion.
That's right, one of the true greats, Paul. And the vendor of this one apparently had spent £11,000 on just parts in the past year alone.
Really?
And that was really well bought by someone at 15.8. That's about $20,000. At the other end, there was a very smart 1983 Porsche 911 Turbo. That made £63,000. So another one at pretty much top estimate. There was truly something for every pocket.
Yeah.
Others that took my eye, there was the ex-Wheeler Dealers Amphicar. Do you remember that?
Yes, of course I remember that.
Yeah.
Fantastic car.
I always thought with an Amphicar, if you took that into the local lake and it sank, that'd be a good insurance claim, wouldn't it? Filling out that form.
Well, it'd make the illustration interesting, that's for sure.
Well, that hammered out at £40,000, so about $52,000.
They go for serious money.
Oh, yeah, they're so collectible.
But a rare
things.
thing.
Yeah. And I tell you what, too, there was a decent Mark I Toyota MR2. Now, they're really hot with collectors right now, aren't they?
They really are.
Yeah, and this one hammered at £7,200, so that's about $9,500, and it was guided at 5 to 7.
Really, that did well. I mean, I'm a big fan of the original MR2, I must admit. I bought one a few years ago when they were an absolute steal, but those days are long gone, I'm afraid.
Yeah, oh, nice. I was also, just wrapping up, particularly taken with a 1966 Alfa Romeo. It was a 1600 Giulia Spider. Very bravely offered, I thought, at no reserve.
Really?
And it really was mint. I mean, the paint finish underneath the car was one that most of us would be pleased to see on top.
Wow.
It was a rare right-hand drive example. It just had 2 owners. Vendor was talking about costing £150,000 to bring it up to this standard.
Really?
So at £75,000, that's what, a few Wendy burgers short of $100,000. Yeah, it was top money.
Yeah, it is.
But it was still half the resto cost. And I'd say that the new owner drove away with a sweet ride at an even sweeter price.
Well, it sounds like it. It certainly proves yet again that paying top money for a top car, it's still a lot cheaper than restoring a bad one to a high standard, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. In the current market, that's very true. And I reckon it's likely to stay that way for some time. And supporting your point, Paul, I've certainly noticed that the top money, it's certainly there for a lovely example of a motor car. But anything that doesn't present well, then people, quite understandably, they're either keeping their hands in their pockets or they want a real bargain.
Yeah, but then, now I hear that you weren't able to get your hands in your pockets, were you? You actually bought something at this sale.
Well, that's just good manners, Paul. You know, you get invited to dinner, you take a bottle of wine. You get invited to an auction, you're expected to buy a motor car.
I'm not sure that's how it's supposed to work. I'll explain later, mate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really.
Okay, then. Meanwhile, quickly across the pond, Bonhams. They had a successful sale at Scottsdale in Phoenix, Arizona. 110 really classy motor cars at this sale.
Really?
Very sweet 1924 Rolls-Royce, a Ghost Roadster. That left with, I'm sure, a delighted new owner for £280,000. There was a lovely 1955 Lancia Aurelia Spider.
Oh, stylish.
The colour, a beautiful deep opalescent metallic green. That cost someone, wait for this, £617,000.
They had deep pockets.
Yeah, but they parked that dream in the driveway.
Yeah.
There was a Packard Super 8 from 1939. That made $58,000. That's about £44,000. I've got a soft spot for Packards because that's what my dad drove.
Really?
Although he preferred drop heads. And this one, at £44,000, was a hearse.
This was a hearse?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
so not to everyone's taste, but there it was.
Yeah.
Rather more sporty than a Packard hearse was a car I really fancied this. It was a 67 Corvette, so that's a C2, of course,
yeah.
for that year. It was a roadster, and it had got the 427 390 horsepower, the big block motor, and it was the recipient of an NCRS Top Flight Award, and they don't hand those out too readily.
No, they don't.
No. So I think, although it made $78,000, that's about £60,000, I reckon one day we'll be looking back and saying how cheap they were back then.
Yeah, you could be right. Didn't you used to have a 63 Vet, though, yourself, Rich?
Yeah, I did, that's right. But it wasn't the Roadster, I had the coupe.
Oh, the split rear window one. That's the one they only made for 1 year, is that right?
Yeah, it's absolutely iconic. It was in silver.
Yeah.
A real dream car.
I can imagine.
In my opinion, one of America's finest sports cars.
Absolutely.
And I hope you're sitting down for this one, Paul, because it's a classic from the UK, a Morgan Plus 4, the Super Sports.
Oh, lovely.
That dropped the hammer at $103,000.
Really?
Yep, you heard me correctly. That's nearly £80,000 for a Morgan. It combined an extensive racing history with a showing at Pebble Beach. That's not a win at Pebble Beach. That's just turning up.
Hey, so taking part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it was just one of 101 alley-bodied super sports. So it's rare.
It's rare.
But frankly, I'd want the glove box to be full of gold for that money. But then I'm a bit careful with the savings, I guess.
You said it.
Although, as the wonderful Jay Leno once said, I don't overpay for a car, just sometimes I pay a price that's a bit too early.
That's true.
I remember he told the tale of one day turning down a car at $6,500 because he thought it was $500 too much. And some years later, he bought that same car and he paid not $6,500, he paid $60,000.
Crikey.
So I totally get his point. And as the Meekham auctioneer said when I was there, he raised the hammer to sell the Steve McQueen car, and he said something like, will you look at yourself in 3 years' time and say, I'm the guy who didn't catch the bullet? I really feel, particularly as my life goes on, if you want the car and you have the money, just buy it.
Yeah.
That chunk of change that you missed it for, that won't do you any good when you're too old and sick to drive it.
No, that's very true. Wise words, Rich. Anyway, let's not forget that among the auctions happening soon in the UK is the one hosted by Silverstone Auctions at Race Retro. It takes place at Stoneleigh in Warwickshire on the 21st and 22nd of February, with competition cars being sold on the Friday and classics going under the hammer on the Saturday, although automobilia will also be sold throughout both days.
That sounds like a great one, Paul.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, Race Retro is a terrific show, and the auction should be a cracker. If anyone wants to find out more about the show or the auction, of course, simply go to raceretro.com.
We'll be back in a moment, so don't go away.
This is the toughest, roughest school the car can go to. The racetracks of Europe. And this is what came out. The latest Ford Cortina. The latest Cortina never forgot what it learnt. And it brings the road-holding, performance, maneuverability and stamina of a race car to your everyday motoring. Cortina is big inside, compact outside. Beautiful too, with many different body options, lots of different engine options and others, like automatic transmission. Cortina is the car that won prizes, lots of them. Now it's too busy winning friends. Ford Cortina, more car between the wheels.
You're listening to Classic Car Talk with Paul and Richard.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Welcome back. Now then, a slight change of scene for me as I've managed to sneak away from the studio and escape Richard in the process, which is no bad thing, as he does have some rather strange habits. Anyway, I'm here with fellow classic car fanatic James Davis, who has kindly invited me into his home to talk about a rather special classic car that he owns. So, hello, James, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for the tea. We don't get that in the studio. Now, James, you're the proud owner of an MGA, aren't you? But this isn't just any MGA. This one is the rather special twin-cam version.
Yeah, it was the twin cam for those listeners that they may well have heard of it. For those that haven't, it was a different derivative of the MGA. It was based on a 1600 twin overhead cam engine, which was originally designed for the record-breaking attempts that were carried out in the 50s in America, and that was a supercharged version of the same engine. But it was a pretty quick car of its time. I mean, not when you look back today, its top speed was claimed to be 120 miles an hour, but based on the 1500, the standard vehicle, it was significantly more horsepower and certainly.
Well, it was quite a jump, wasn't it? Because I think the original MGA, the 1500, I think wasn't that around about 70 brake horsepower, but of the twin cam that you have, that was, I think, officially 108 when it was new. That was a heck of an increase, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the engine itself was different in terms of the fact it redlined at 7,000 RPM, which, again, I'm not brave enough to do that today.
No.
But certainly the engine comes alive over 4,000 RPM. It's a beautiful engine.
But it wasn't just the engine that made the twin cam special, was it? Because this was also the MGA with four-wheel disc brakes, which I guess it needed.
Yeah, it was, and Dunlop engineered those, and the road wheels, which were knock-ons or knock-offs, if you want to call them that, but basically pegged onto the axles. So it looked cosmetically, a different car. I mean, they made about 100,000 MGAs, and of that, probably just over 2,100 were twin cams, and the majority of those were exported. So the right-hand drive vehicles, especially the coupes, I mean, they only made about 200 right-hand drive coupes. So they are, today, a very rare car.
Yeah, I mean, the MGA was such a huge hit overseas, wasn't it? I think, didn't it have the record for the highest percentage of export sales of its time? Something like 95% went abroad, but a real money earner for MG, of course, even if the twin cam version, as you say, was rather less successful. I mean, was the rarity or the lack of success, if you like, of the twin cam, was that down to reliability issues? I mean, it had a bit of a reputation at its time. Was that fair or a little bit unjust? Yeah,
no, it was totally fair, actually. And many people I meet with the car that know them when they were around new comment and ask, how's the engine? And there was a couple of technical reasons for that. The cars ran on a very high compression ratio, and when they were produced in their early production run, the fuel used to aerate because the vibration of the engine used to lean off the mixture in the carbs. So the cars ran lean on a high compression and used to burn pistons. And in fact, the dad's car, when he was coming back from Silverstone racing one day in the old days as you drove to and from circuits, it actually dropped a valve and lunched a head and a piston. So he did suffer that in terms of his own ownership, but actually...
And that wasn't unusual then?
No, it wasn't. I mean, I heard a pretty scary figure about how the percentage of warranty claims on engines on twin cams in the first couple of years was... literally scary for any manufacturer to deal with. So
you mentioned your father there, James, and I think it's probably a good point to bring him into this conversation because your dad originally had your car, didn't he? He bought it when it was only a few years old.
Yeah, that's right, Paul. He bought the car when it was 3 years old, and it was with him for 53 years before my stepmother sold it in Canada. And Dad had always said, I mean, bear in mind...
So it was sold quite recently then?
Yeah, about just over 3 years ago now. And that was to fund his healthcare. And, that's entirely understandable, and unfortunately he's passed away now. However, when she told me she'd sold it, Dad had always said it's going to come to you, and despite them living and retiring in Canada... The plan was to bring it back to the UK, and he'd come over and we could go to Silverstone and race and to events. But I helped him restore it in the late 80s. He raced it in the 60s and club events with the MG Car Club. So
it was worked hard then throughout those 53 years.
Absolutely, not many miles, but he enjoyed a spirited drive in it, and I loved being driven. But he was a great driver. I mean, sadly, the disease took all of that, including his license, away from him. But actually, I never drove the car because Dad had always said, "Look, it's going to come to you." So when Stepmom had announced that, and I have no issue, she announced that it had to go to fund the healthcare. I thought, wow, I'm never going to see it again.
Yeah, of course.
It was quite a wrench.
Yeah.
Quite a wrench. However, the story had a happy ending.
Well, this is where it gets intriguing and also, dare I say, quite emotional because by sheer chance, you tell the story. You've ended up with the car once again that you thought had gone forever.
Absolutely. Well, as I said, Paul, I all my life, and bear in mind, my father took my mother on honeymoon down to Cornwall in the car. The first time I ever met my stepmother was with the car when we went to Silverstone. So literally, I'd grown up whenever I went to see him abroad. We worked on the car together. We always talked about my legacy taking the car on. And then when it was suddenly not there, I resigned myself that, that's just the way sometimes life goes. So I sold a whole load of memorabilia, spare parts, things I'd collected over the years, thinking it's going to come to me.
Yeah.
And in the process of doing that, it was a wonderful experience because I met so many twin cam owners and shared the story